to the cloud. All right, so I'll say that part again. This is the Town of New Canaan Town Council regular meeting for Wednesday, June 17th, 2020, and a public hearing on a proposed ordinance to improve volunteer first responder recruitment and retention, including tax incentives. And we have already conducted the roll call, and the meeting is called to order. With that, let's move to a special item, which is the adding of an agenda item to our meeting tonight. Do I have a proposal to add the agenda item of a facility lease agreement, approval of a facility lease agreement between the town and New Canaan YMCA regarding use of Kiwanis Park? Does somebody want to make that proposal? The motion? To add it to our agenda?
I'll make the motion to add the lease item to the agenda.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll
Second.
second. Yep.
Okay, Penny, second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I see. Hold up your hands because I'm going to at least count a majority of hands. So I see Steve, Penny, Maria, Sven, Rich, Liz, and John. That makes a majority, so it's added. Did I have 8? It's difficult because I only have 25 people on my screen.
And
Does
Tom.
anybody object?
There's Tom.
My,
I think that's 9.
Okay. Okay. Mark and Tom. Good. All right. It is added. Where, Kevin, would you like to put that on our agenda, or Tom? You want to put it at the end? I don't know. You know what? I don't.
Kevin's muted.
John, how long is your meeting going to go? Because Craig Penzano's on here, and I don't know if we ought to at least alert him to what we're going to be talking about.
Okay. How much time do you think that one will take? If Craig's on it, let's do it early. Let's do it right
Let
after.
me do it first. Get it over with.
Yeah, right after the public comments. Okay, so we'll
Everybody
add
go
it as
home.
item number 5. Okay, with that, let's open up a public hearing. I'm not exactly sure what this means, but we have a public hearing on a proposed ordinance to improve volunteer first responder recruitment and retention, including tax incentives. Stadler, can you explain what you expect in a public hearing? Do we just open it up to the public to speak on this issue?
That's correct. I think Steve Carl's been through this a few times and he can lead us.
Okay, go ahead, Carl.
Thank you, Tom. So whenever we have a proposed ordinance, we're required by state statute to have a public hearing so that we can receive any public comment regarding the proposed ordinance. This ordinance has appeared in local online publications under the new COVID guidelines. We do not have to actually put it in the newspapers because the newspapers aren't circulating as widely as online reading is going now. So this has been put out there, and I don't know if there's anybody in the public who would like to comment on it, but I'll open up the floor and take comments from anybody who would like to comment on the proposed ordinance for property tax abatement and other benefits for volunteer first responders. You can raise your hand.
Or blurt out if you're on page 2 and we can't see you. All right, if there's nobody who actually wants to address the council, let's just review what this is. It's on your tablets, Town Council. The purpose is to encourage and increase volunteer participation in the fire and emergency medical services. Therefore, we are establishing certain additional benefits being made available to the eligible volunteers. Then we define what is active. What does it mean to be active? We define certification date. We define eligible resident and eligible non-resident, and then we define the benefit. shall mean the reduction in property taxes described in subsection 3A and access to town facilities 3B below for eligible residents and access to town facilities 3B for eligible non-residents. And then we go on to describe those tax benefits and those access. That's my summary of the ordinance. Are there any comments?
John, just to add to that, and obviously if anybody else in the public is watching, we've reviewed this at a number of different meetings to get to this point. Russ Kimes is on the call, as well as Phil Shively from the EMS, Russ representing the fire department. I see Jack Horner out there as well.
And
these
Bonnie.
and Bonnie. Hi, Bonnie. And so this has been in front of the town council, both in subcommittee and as the full council. We've had lengthy discussions on it, and it's a thoroughly written document now. And I want to thank Mike Morrow for getting the language in line and getting it all lined up. The only thing that we've taken out of here, we did a little history. We did present to the Board of Finance, and we did take out a piece that had to do with healthcare. That became a little stickier than we wanted to tackle at the moment. So we may revisit that, but for now, we wanted to get this on the books, get it moving. It's long overdue, and I really do want to thank, in particular, Russ for the work he's done getting it to this point, and Phil as well. So thank you guys. So is there any questions from the floor? Any comments anybody wants to make?
Steve, it's Mark. I just want to give a shout out as well to Russ and Phil. And I also want to give you a shout out and Mike for really taking the lead on this.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
At this time, obviously, normally we'd be in the room together, and it's been difficult to get stuff like this done. But it really is a team effort. So thank you to everybody for getting this done. Hopefully we're only a month away from getting back in the room together. So without further ado, I believe the next thing that we need to do here, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, can we get it on the floor here to vote it in?
Yeah, we need a motion.
Yeah. So I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance as written. And we'll need a
Hey,
second.
John and Steve, I think you have to note that what you're proposing to adopt is different than what was published.
Is it identical to what's on our tablet? Is not what we published?
Well,
Kev, I thought Pam had the most recent. I think we pulled that from the I think the health part of it was pulled, but I could be wrong.
what was actually published to the public?
Yeah, the attachment on the note that went out had this version without the health insurance added to it.
Yes, I believe that's the case. But basically, we're going to approve the version that we're going to put into the minutes. Tom, you make a note that actual document that we're approving tonight will go into our minutes tonight, and that's the official document that we'll approve. Thanks for bringing that up, Kevin. That's important. You want to make sure that it matches what the public has seen. But I believe the version we have tonight is what the public has seen.
And Steve, that gives it an effective date of?
Sven, always a good question. It's 30. Tom, correct me if I'm wrong. Usually, once it's voted on, it'll have to be noticed again. It usually is 30 days, I believe, from our approval. Gives folks a time to.
Something like that. There's a time period in there.
Yeah. But it's a good point, Sven. So certainly by the end of July, we'll get this going, officially, on the books and done. Unfortunately, the pool pass part of this, you'll have to give up some of the pool. We'll check that. Maybe we can get it going a little sooner for the guys. I'd like to. The point is to thank everybody for what they're doing too. It's not a big cost to the town, and we really do want to thank everybody for all the hard work that they've been doing up to this point. All those volunteer hours. I mean, it's hours and hours and hours that folks are putting in. So thank you to everybody.
So we
So
have a motion from Steve to adopt the document as we see it on our tablets, which we believe is the same document that was published. If it was not published, we'll republish it. But we're voting, do I have a second?
Yes.
Okay, Mark Jimsky seconds the motion to adopt the ordinance as described on our tablets. There being no further discussion, raise your hand. And actually, you know what? Since we're adopting an ordinance, why don't you call the roll, Rich, and we'll say yes or no.
Okay.
John, aren't we in a public hearing session right at the moment? And we have to come out of the public hearing and go back into our regular meeting to vote?
Oh, I don't know. Can't we vote in the public hearing?
We don't vote in the public hearings.
Penny, of course, is right on the rules of the town council, as always. So
Okay.
we do have to leave the.
If there are no further comments, public,
I will make a motion to come out of public hearing.
yes, Penny makes a motion and I second it to come out of public hearing. All in favor, raise your hand. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 on my screen. So we are now out of public hearing. Now, Steve, do you want to make a motion?
John, before you make another motion, I still have to raise the question. What I see on your tablets still has the line of duty death property tax abatement. And Cheryl's on here, and I thought that was coming out because it's a union negotiation item.
I believe that was only for the police and career fire. The volunteers, we were leaving that in because it's, impactful.
So, Tom
Yeah,
Stadler, are you clear what was published and what is here?
No. No, I'm not. Pam took.
Well, if you want to just make clear that you're adopting something that only applies to volunteers, that's fine. But there was language in here that applied to paid first responders, and that couldn't be in here without it going to union negotiations.
That's right. I do remember we discussed that, Cheryl. I apologize. Are you okay with the language as written, or do we need to amend that in some way before it's official?
I know from my side and speaking with the attorneys, we cannot direct deal with our unions. That would have to be negotiated. So, and I think Mike can speak to this, but that part would have to be removed and have a benefit just for the volunteers.
Yes.
And then when we negotiate it, we'll have to come back to the town council to add to that ordinance.
Okay. So let's, before we adopt it, let's get the language right and let the minutes reflect the correct language. So Cheryl, can you suggest the correct language? Or are we striking a particular line there?
Russ, I don't have it in front of me since we spoke yesterday.
Isn't all of Section 5 applicable to paid first responders?
No, Section 5 it speaks to emergency medical technicians, fire duties, firefighters. So it would be as amended, removing basically language, full-time firefighters, paid firefighters at a local 3224, as well as police officers, any language of police officers. That would be it as amended. And then it covers EMTs and volunteer firefighters, which is the intent.
Well, police officers are in this, what's on your tablets. So you're not adopting what's on your tablets.
Right.
Well, in 5B, it says honor police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical technicians.
So if somehow that can state volunteer first responders, then I think you're good.
But we don't have volunteer police officers.
No.
So can we delete everywhere in section 5 that it says police officers
And
preface that with volunteer firefighters and volunteer emergency medical technicians?
Right, as long as that's your understanding of what you're adopting.
That's very clear.
Yes.
So I'll make the motion to amend.
Second.
Is Tom Stadler clear on Sven's motion to amend on what exactly is being amended?
I am, yes.
Okay. So we have Sven's motion, Mike's second discussion. That was it. Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. I see John, Christina, Rich, Mike, Liz, Sven, Robin, Maria, Penny, Steve. I don't see Tom Butterworth's hand.
No, I'm going to abstain from voting on the text because for some reason today's the first time I've seen it.
Okay.
So somehow I missed out on the process. I don't know if that was my oversight or somebody else's, but I'm going to abstain for tonight.
Okay, so we have one abstention. I believe everybody else, are we 11 in favor of the amendment? Yes, okay.
Yes.
So we are 11 to 0 to 1 abstention. Okay, so the amendment is made. Steve Carls had the motion. Who had the second?
I did.
Okay, Mark had the second. Any further discussion? Okay, there being none, all in favor, raise your hand. So John, Christina, and Mark is 3. Liz, Mike, Rich is 6. Sven, no?
I'm recused.
Okay.
I am included in this.
Okay, and Robin, you're recused?
I have a family member who this would benefit, so I recuse myself.
Okay, recuse. And we've got Maria, Penny, Steve, and Tom is abstaining or recusing again. So we have 3 recusals and I believe 9 in favor. You got that, Tom?
No, I only have 2 recusals. Who's the third?
Tom Butterworth?
That would be
Abstention.
abstain.
Abstention. Yeah.
Oh, isn't that the same thing? No vote. Sven,
No,
Tom,
no.
no, not the same?
It's different.
Okay.
Conflict of interest.
So I have 2 recusals and 1 abstention.
And 9-4. So the motion passes.
9-3.
Yes, 9-0-3. Okay, congratulations, police.
Hey, John, before we leave this item, I know I thank Mike Morrow and I just want to thank Mark Jimsky who helped on this as well. And of course, Sven, who did a ton of work on this. So, and he's been working on this for a year. So this is a big moment for our volunteers and it's long overdue. And again, thank you to all the volunteers that this will affect. I think it's great for recruiting, retention. It's great for New Canaan. So it's a very, very happy night for those folks and for New Canaan.
Yeah, great message to all of our volunteers. So appreciate the efforts to get this through.
Yeah,
And
and
I'd like to say thanks again. And Bonnie, I hope you'll accept our welcome as the new captain of New Canaan EMS. And just want to say hi to all the town council people for us.
He's muted.
Bonnie?
It's an honor to be recognized by all of you. Some of you I've known half of my life on this screen. So it certainly is amazing, and I'm happy to be here with all of you. And I really thank your welcoming Sven, another old friend. So I will hope to serve EMS in full steed, and Phil also as the outgoing captain. I know he's worked tireless hours on this as well. So I want to thank Phil and Russ, our other partner.
And the fire commissioner says thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, thank you all. There being nothing further on that, we'll move to our next item on the agenda, approval of the minutes for the May 20th, 2020 regular meeting and the June 3rd, 2020 special meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes? I see Christina, motion to approve. I see Sven, second. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, there being none, raise your hand if you approve the minutes. So I see one, John, Christina, I see Mark, Mike, Liz, Rich, Sven, Robin, Maria, Penny, Steve, and Tom. Okay, the minutes are approved. Got you in there, Tom. Good. Couldn't sit all night without voting for something. Okay, public comments. Members of the public are welcome to speak to the town council on agenda topics scheduled for review and/or vote. Speakers are requested to provide their name and street address, and comments will be limited to 2 or 3 minutes, subject to the total number of speakers. I had one person talk to me about wanting to speak to the council. Who was that? Who would like to address? Kim Norton. She'll go for anyone else speak. Put your name in the chat window and I'll call on you next. Kimberly, would you like to begin?
Sure. Good evening. First of all, okay, so my name is Kimberly Norton. I live at 17 Green Avenue in New Canaan. Good evening, and thank you for letting me speak this evening about the 1913 Landmark Legacy Library and the draft library MOU, even though neither issue is on your agenda. The Friends of Our 1913 Library by a well-respected firm run by seasoned and experienced professionals specializing in market research, strategic planning, land use, property repurposing, and economic development. We have received very positive preliminary feedback on the viability of reusing 1913 building for other purposes, and in the firm's opinion, the building would be a sought-after property for many different types of tenants as an impressive headquarters for different businesses. In addition, some preliminary pro forma financial analyses that we have conducted are also very promising, showing that not only can 1913 library be preserved, it can be a vital, standalone, income-producing building. As you peruse the draft library MOU, we ask that you please carefully consider these positive, albeit preliminary findings on our part and help us to find a way to keep 1913 standing in its current location. Preservation connotes the opposite of progress to some. However, modern views of preservation are quite the opposite. Reusing, repurposing what we have provides a way to protect our environment, lessening the effects of climate change, and helps us to turn a corner in our town that has viewed older buildings in a negative light. Essentially, the 1913 building can be a startup venture that is over 100 years old. How exciting is that? Please join me and the 325 other people. 85% of our signees to our petition currently live in New Canaan, and the rest are former residents who have signed our petition to find a way to save the historical and intellectual soul of our town. We urge you to insert provisions into the draft library MOU for 1913 to remain, along with property protections for our children and grandchildren to enjoy. Friends of the 1913 library are open and willing to meet with the New Canaan Library Board and even perhaps help them to fundraise for a shared project that incorporates our legacy library. However, if this is not possible, we are prepared, ready, and positioned to move forward, preserving 1913 library as a standalone venture and as a gift to our town for many generations to come. Thank you for listening and for considering these important updates from our group. As always, thank you for your service to our town and the countless hours you spend representing us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a copy of those remarks that we can add to our minutes?
Not yet, but I can email them to Tom.
Great, thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council?
We have Robin Fletcher in the chat.
Okay, I don't get to see her because you opened up the meeting, so I'm going to rely on you, Tom.
Well,
Is
let me
Robin Fletcher out there?
make you the host.
There she is.
Hi there. My name, actually, Robin Fletcher is my husband, so this is his Zoom account. My name is Lauren Motley. I live at 43 Marvin Ridge Road. My house backs onto Kiwanis Park, so my remarks are in relation to the late addition to your agenda tonight with regards to the YMCA contract. Is it best that I speak to that now, or should I wait till that actually comes up later? I wasn't sure about the procedures.
Now.
Oh, okay, perfect, great. I have 3 aspects I wanted to refer to with regards to that discussion. First, I want to kind of ask the council about what type of a market test they have done on that contract. From my understanding, it looks like it's a $10,000 contract for the entirety of the 2020 camp season. My question really was for the council is what type of comparability or market test has it done to other YMCA camp contracts or similar types of contracts in Darien, Ridgefield, Westport, or Greenwich? It just seems a very low threshold. $10,000 does not seem to be a high threshold for the council. And given the expenses it is to maintain the park and other transactional concerns that have been with the park, I just question whether there has been a market test on that. The second point I wanted to raise with regards to that contract is in previous years, we have not been able to access the trails, and I understand that that's for security reasons. The campers themselves are minors, but there's no signage on either the trailheads or in the trail forks that the public is not able to access the trails during the session. So my request is either that is taken up here or maybe in the Parks and Recs that there is closure signs, maybe clapboard signs to say that the park trails are not accessible to the public during that session. I'm not sure if that is in the contract or not. The third point I want to raise, it's somewhat related and tangential, but it's also with regards to this, is the point of principle that like the park and the contract is giving access exclusively to the YMCA camp during that time, which means that 5 days a week, the general public is not able to use the actual Kiwanis Park pond. Given that we are in the middle of a pandemic, I appreciate that we are trying to keep social distancing and whatnot. However, my point of this is that we all have limited options with holidaying this year, given that all the COVID-19 things. So the availability of other New Canaan residents and their children to use the park and pond during that time is not available. So I challenge and I question the exclusivity that's been given to the YMCA during that contract period. That's my remarks.
Thank you. Do you, just a question, do you represent yourself or are you part of a group speaking on behalf of a group of neighbors?
No, this is myself, but I do talk to a couple other neighbors. My house backs onto the property line, but I'm just speaking my own personal capacity.
Okay. Because I know we got a letter from another neighbor and I didn't know whether this was a group and you were organized and speaking on behalf of a group of neighbors. Okay. Very good input. Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? I believe I see in the chat window Betty and Angelo. Is Betty and Angelo out there?
Can you hear me? John, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. I'm the person who sent that last minute thing because I sort of received the lease late this afternoon. But I'd like to read the letter, if I may.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. According to the Kiwanis Park deed, this park is to be held by the town of New Canaan for the benefit of its residents for park and recreational purposes only. I sent to the commissioners, the committee, a copy of the deed. It wasn't deeded for the YMCA. Secondly, on June 30th, 2020, prior to COVID in the United States, January 30th, 2020, prior to COVID in the United States, the New Canaan Advertiser reported that First Selectman continues to meet with Craig Penzano. Craig Penzano is the director of the YMCA. So back in January, he was in discussions with the Y about their use. They're very interested in taking over the house in the pavilion, said Moynihan. Their program is bursting at the seams. I sent the document on that. Penzano suggested back in January that the Y take over the Kiwanis Park from Mondays through Fridays and keep the park and beach open to residents only on the weekends. So prior to anything with an executive order, this sort of arrangement or discussion was going on. The Board of Finance actually, I believe, approved keeping Kiwanis Park open for the residents, not closing it. They wanted to fund it. There was so much community backlash about closing the park. from prior meetings. Prior to the proposed lease, the residents enjoyed the park as the prior speaker had mentioned. We enjoyed the park and beach 7 days a week. Mondays through Fridays, the non-Y people used half of the beach and the Y campers had the other half. The figures that I'm quoting now and sent to the committee, 2017, the non-Y visitors was 7,984. The campers are 5,070. I used 130 times 39 days, so it's 8 weeks minus July 4th, and that's assuming everybody shows up. So the non-visitors, the non-Y campers in 2017 was 7,984. In 2018, it was 6,674 to the Ys 5,000. And in 2019, the non-Y visitors was 8,145. So as the prior speaker had mentioned, there is usage of it. It's fluid like it is at Waveney Park. People aren't sitting there all day. They come, they stay an hour, they go home, they have little kids, they play, the kids go home for a nap. And what I'd like to also mention, COVID impacts everybody, not just the 120 or 130 or 140 Y campers. We need a place to go. My vacation plans were canceled. I can't go anywhere. And now when you close off the pool and you limit the pool and only a certain number can go, I can't go to the beach with my family. Other people who can't go anywhere have no place to go. So why can't we continue to split the beach in half like we've done for at least 20 years that I've been here and cut down the amount of people from the Y that use the beach and let the other half go to us, to families who have no place to go. Thank you very much. In here.
There we go.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Betty. Is there anyone else? Oh, I have to make Tom a co-host now. You made me a host, and now I have to make you a co-host. There you go. Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to address the council on any item on our agenda? I don't see anybody in the chat window or raising a physical hand or a avatar hand. Okay, then we will close the public comments portion of the meeting and move on to item number 5, facility lease agreement. Approval of a facility lease agreement between the town and New Canaan YMCA regarding use of Kiwanis Park. Do I have a motion? We have to start with a motion. Do I have a motion? Do I have a motion to approve the, oh, Mike has approved the there we go, okay. I have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
I think everyone's on mute, John.
You can raise your hand. I'll take Mike. All right, Mike made the motion. Do I have a second? Oh, Mark. Okay. Now we can open up the discussion. So
Hey, John,
I'd like to open it up to Kevin. Would you like to start?
Yeah, I'd like to make a presentation first on this because, you know, as you know, we're operating in an emergency and we've had to make a number of decisions about activities on public property and what we allow with respect to private entities. And when it came down to camps, we initially were not going to allow any camps as far as public camps. And the YMCA, which is a licensed facility, been operating at Kiwanis for 50 or 60 years, wanted to be able to expand as much as possible since you have to spread out kids in small groups on the campus. And so, you know, we started conversations with the Y back in October about them using the house, which had become vacant. And we continue those discussions into the budget season. And the discussion was around the fact that we were operating a pond that cost $90,000 a year to operate. And relatively few people other than camps from Waveney Camp and the daycare center would come over by bus to the pond. that was not possible this year for either the daycare center or the Waveney camps. So Waveney camps are operating on a very, very limited basis because of the restrictions. Similar restrictions to what we're going to apply to summer school, and the superintendent and the Board of Ed decided not to operate summer school because of the state restrictions. So we made a decision to allow the Y to expand, to use, and provided they, to the greatest extent possible, expanded the number of New Canaan families that would be accommodated. They have 8 all-day sessions. The Waveney camp is a half-a-day session with 30 kids. And also the Kiwanis Park would be open on weekends and in evenings after 5:30 if Steve Banko wants to operate it. So it was a trade-off. It was a compromise. We're making a lot of compromises in this current emergency. And historically, the Y has only paid $5,000 to the town for their usage of the back part of the facility, including some of the buildings. They've agreed to pay 2/3 of the cost of opening and operating the pond. And they're going to invest a small amount of money into the house, which they hope to be able to use in future years. This is a 1-year deal only. This would not be the deal we were looking at if this was a first year of a 5-year deal, which was what we were talking about back in January, February. So that's the background. Quite honestly, I missed the step about the town council having to approve a new lease. And it's arguable whether or not in the emergency we need to go through this process, but I thought we should go through the process.
It's always a good idea to go through this process in public if the public's interested. Let me ask a couple questions. One, a resident brought up the question of signage on the trails and whether we're going to be putting up signs that restrict the trails use during camp. Do you know anything about that yet?
Well, keep in mind, as a licensed facility, and since the state requirements for camps doesn't allow any kind of commingling of people, and that was one of the primary reasons why we couldn't accommodate multiple activities on the campus. We can put up signs, but you know they were closed before. Now there's an additional reason to be closed because the Y cannot maintain its license with having anybody on the premises.
So it's our intent to put up the signs. My next question is, are those numbers cited by a resident that said that there are roughly 7,000 visitors, non-camp visitors, and 5,000 camp visitors? Are those more or less true, or do we not know, or are the numbers something else?
I think the Y statistics were 160 campers a day. We also opened up Kiwanis to non-residents. We're not opening up Waveney Pool to non-residents. We also are going to accommodate as many families as want to be at the at the Waveney Pool. We've cut back the annual fee to $300. We offer scholarships to families that need scholarships to Waveney Pool. So I think we can, with the elimination of, all the campers that went there can no longer go there because of the state restrictions. They can't get on buses and go to the Kiwanis Pond.
I'm going to ask a tough question. It was mentioned that there was a question of spending $90,000 on an underused in the fall on an underused asset. That was not the reason for this decision, right? That is not the reason.
Not at all. In fact, what was approved was, I think, a $55,000 budget for curtail hours. So that by the way, other towns are not even opening their ponds. Wilton has decided they're not even going to take the risk of opening their pond at all for the season. So, a lot of these decisions were very judgmental as to whether or not we should even engage in some activities. And
so this was not economics. You're saying that the sole reason for doing this was the state executive order forced you to make a decision between the public or the camp.
Monday through Friday, because we can't have commingled activities.
And in the last 24 hours, it suggested that we could open up the Kiwanis to residents from 5:30 on. Is that something that we're considering, and what would that cost?
We've authorized that. That's consistent with the $55,000 budget that Steve Banko has for lifeguards and staff at Kiwanis.
Any resident can use it after 5:30 on weekdays and on weekends with or without a permit, or you need to get a permit?
Well, they don't, Parks and Rec doesn't need a permit, but they also, you can't have swimming without a lifeguard.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Are there any other questions from council members on the contract or on the ideas that went into the contract?
I do. This is Christina. As far as the lifeguard, is the town going to provide lifeguards for those hours beyond 5:30?
if Steve Banko decides to, he's beyond, historically, I think it's been open to 7:30 or 8 at night. So that if Steve wants to, he's got the authorization in the budget, and he's got the authorization to use the facility after 5:30. But he's definitely going to have it open on weekends.
So earlier in the presentation, you said that the Kiwanis runs at a cost to the town of $90,000 per year. If you take the average, for example, 12 months, it works out to be $7,500 a month. You're proposing leasing the facility to the YMCA for its $10,000, which is much less than our cost per month on average.
No. The $90,000 is 85% staff, lifeguards and staff. The cost of opening and operating the pond itself is less than $10,000. Sand, chemicals. So the $90,000 and the $55,000 is primarily lifeguard expense and staff.
What is the advantage to the town to lease it for $10,000, which sounds to me like a very low number?
Well, it's double what the Y has been paying for the past number of years. Plus, the YMCA is a nonprofit. We've been trying to help nonprofits as well as our commercial establishments. This is a nonprofit that has been banged up badly with the COVID and
discussing looking at leases and bringing them more up to date.
Well, this is an 8-week lease for the season only.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, and they're severely cut back on the number of kids they can have. They've had 160. They authorized for 120. They were going to try to get authorization for 10 or 20 more from the Department of Childhood Education, Early Childhood, and but they're severely restricted on the number of kids they can have as well. But it's a full day program, which accommodates a lot of families.
But they're not limited to just New Canaan residents, right?
The YMCA is not a New Canaan only membership organization.
Kevin, if we don't approve the lease to the Y, does that mean that the public will have full use of the park for the summer? Is it a choice between the public and the Y? Because you're saying you can't have both of them. So is that the choice that we're looking at here?
They can't be on the same campus, commingled activities. So,
well, does that mean that
under the Y's license? So again, the Y's been there 60 years, and we had to make some compromises. So at the end of the day, we've made a number of decisions, and that some have not been popular. We initially were not going to allow any camps, and so at least we're trying to get as many people accommodated as possible.
I understand that, and I applaud that. I'm just trying to understand, when we lease this to the Y, the public cannot be there when the Y's there. If we didn't lease it to the Y, could the public use it, or will you close the park?
Do we have it in the budget to hire lifeguards and actually switch the use?
Yes, we did.
I think. Let's switch what use? I understand what you said.
What Rich is saying is if we do not approve the YMCA lease, is the alternative that we close down the park, or do we have the money and the desire to hire lifeguards and open it up to the public as an alternative?
I'd have to go back to our EOC and discuss that. That's not something.
Well, what did the I thought the $55,000 was to run it for the summer.
That's pre-COVID. That's if we didn't have this COVID situation.
Well, how would the expenses change with COVID? I'm not sure.
Well, we would be operating a normal operation if we were allowed, not under the state restrictions.
So what would the state restrict? If we just open Kiwanis as normal, what are the restrictions?
You mean if we had our regular arrangement with a Y where they had half the park instead of the whole park?
They would have to cut back from their current plan. They'd have to cut back to probably, Craig is on here. I'm not sure what number they'd cut back to. Because the kids have to be spread out.
I'm confused, and I thought that only we or they could be there. I thought you said they could only be on one campus, and if Kiwanis is one campus, that it's theirs or ours.
They can't share facilities.
Facilities means the house and the et cetera, it's buildings. It's
Bathrooms, et cetera, so.
It's a pond, a facility.
Can I interject?
Go ahead, Greg.
I think the way we've been operating for the last, since I've been here 16 years, it's, we've kept our campers separate. Doesn't mean they can't be in the same water or breathe the same air, but they're not sharing the same space per se. We don't go over to the pavilion. We don't intermingle with Waveney Camp, or we don't go over to that side. If you decide that you want to continue what you've been doing for the last how many years, you can still continue to do that, and we can still continue to run our camp.
I mean, if the deed says it's for park and recreation for residents, I would assume it means all residents. And if it's just limited to paying customers, you're limiting who can go. So that is a concern of mine.
Part of the time, Marianne, in this emergency. So I think, it was definitely a compromise to try to accommodate the town and the Y.
Just so we understand, we could run the camp at like half capacity, a quarter capacity or something, and let the citizens have the other half of the camp as we have done in the past. I think that's what Craig just said.
Yeah,
What about the bathrooms? Neither one is going to want to be in there without bathrooms. So how do you share the bathrooms?
Well,
Was separate.
what ended up happening is the Y camp would have to drastically cut back because they can't operate with the requirement to spread out. And but the other thing is, a lot of the people that went last summer that created those numbers were campers from the Waveney camp, the daycare center, right? Those people cannot come this year. They can't bring anybody down the pond because they can't use buses. Secondly, it was out of towners. And so I went down there several times. Like the reason I started making the recommendation about, actually the discussion was going to be too about having the YMCA run that as a public-private partnership, because their 160 kids far outweighs the 6 or 8 kids that are there on any given day that are residents. It's not an actively used place, except for the campers that come over for a couple hours by bus. That's not going to happen this summer. They can't come over by bus.
Kevin, can you share the actual numbers with us, that how many are coming over versus how many are being used? Several things have happened with Kiwanis. It's just as a side. Last year, we approved capital expenditures to put large umbrellas in Kiwanis so you could get some shade on the poor kids, which they never had before.
Right.
They never got bought in time to be used this summer.
Right.
They've been sitting in a garage or something someplace, so they get used this summer. Right. So Kiwanis has just been a poor stepchild, quite frankly, for the public. And so
the reason being, Rich, is because the pool serves so many people's needs. I mean, the conversation we started last budget season was, should we be running Kiwanis when it costs us $90,000 a year, or could we partner with the Y and have their lifeguards serve the few residents that come to Kiwanis? It's an expensive operation for very few people that use it.
And part of the discussion, Kevin, was the segment of people that use it are people that have kids between the age of about 6 months old and about 5 years old. And that's a difficult segment without sand and relatively shallow water.
No,
And that was one of the reasons we bought the umbrellas, to try and get some shade. It's an impossible place to be with a small child.
Yeah, but there is a baby pool at Waveney, which is, so the whole issue is this summer is not a normal summer by any means.
Mm-hmm. And so the question is, who are we gonna give it to the Y? Or are we gonna give it to the citizens? That's the only question. Now we got umbrellas anyways.
And the Y is going to use the umbrellas.
I understand that.
Penny, are we limiting the number of people who will be at the pool?
We're not allowing non-residents to buy passes, and Steve's feeling is that on any given day, you're not going to be limiting the number of people, perhaps on weekends, because
Well, there's a 320 person capacity limit in the complex.
Right.
But are there state regulations as
As
to
long-
how many people can be at a pool? Because I mean, the private pools, the country club is limiting 100 people. That's it.
they're limiting it based upon the square footage of the area, and that's where the 320 comes from.
So the pool, I think, is limited at 253 in the pool, the kiddie pool at 40 people, and the entire complex 320.
And they may have to limit it on weekends.
Can we get back to the off hours? Is Steve going to get lifeguards so we don't say you can be there after 5:30 and it's not open after 5:30?
That's Steve's choice. We've talked about it.
Why is that Steve's choice? Why isn't that a town issue? It's a town issue. It's for the citizens.
Well, again, he's authorized. He has the budget, and there's people that want lifeguard jobs. He's got 25 lifeguards on staff, so I don't think it's a park recreation decision as to whether they want to operate the evening hours.
I think that's very relevant to asking us as to whether we're going to limit the hours to hours that you're not even saying will necessarily be available to us. It's just, we need an answer like that. I mean, are we going to tell the citizens, yeah, you can come at 5:30 and then it's not open, so you can come on a weekend, so you got 2 days a week that you can have your kids swim? We don't even know what we're telling them.
What time does the Kiwanis have to close at night? There must be something in the lease, in town, that limits the time. No?
I think it closes at dusk.
So it could be open in July until 8:30?
I think the lifeguards have been there to 7:30 or 8 o'clock.
I hear, Kevin, I hear Rich and others saying that their vote on the contract before us, the lease before us, depends on some sort of acknowledgement that we're going to open this up either in the evening, or that Craig can make some kind of accommodation, small accommodation for residents. And either of those things, or both of those things, I think, is what I hear some of the town council members want to hear. I don't think we need a specific plan, but I think if we hear from you saying that you're going to recommend to Steve that he open it up in the evenings, and to Craig that he accommodate a handful of residents from time to time, I think that, that's what the council wants to hear.
Well, I think Steve has it in the budget, and he has people, so there's no reason why he can't open evenings. On the other hand, I'm not sure what you're saying about Craig accommodating, because Craig has to not let people commingle with his people as part of his license.
I totally get that, but I thought I might have heard a little bit of an opening there where Craig said he might be able to segregate his camp from.
No, I didn't say that. I said
Okay.
that's what we've been doing
in the past.
In the last 16 years that I've been here. The segregation is there's like a invisible line down the middle of the pond, and we're on our half, and the town usage is on the other half. We can't we can't be we can't be using the entire facility and then trying to monitor non-campers coming in and trying to minimize and mitigate the, this issue that we're dealing with. The virus is hard enough as it is without trying to control people coming in, from town.
Okay, good. I misunderstood. So now it's clear, because that's probably the most critical issue is residents are saying, can you carve off a little piece of the park? And the answer is, according to the state, no. Got it. We have got to rely on the 5:30 on part of the day to accommodate residents. That's what I'm hearing.
John?
And will accommodate families at Waveney Pool.
Can I ask a question, please? So I guess my question is for Craig. If we go back to the arrangement that's been in place since I was at Kiwanis through the Y many, many years ago, where Kiwanis has half and the town has access to half, given today's circumstances with COVID, how many campers could you accommodate under the traditional arrangement? I don't think we have a number.
I'd have to check. I think, don't quote me, I think it's between 100 and 120. By getting the entire facility, we got approval to go up to 140 because we're getting more space.
And your camp last year was 160.
Yeah.
Is that in one day, like 140 kids worth of?
Each session.
Yes.
Each session.
Each session, yes.
So there's 2 sessions in a day, or is it only
No,
one?
there's one session that's 2 weeks. So if all
Okay.
140 kids came, we would have 140 kids throughout that area there.
And if Kiwanis is just open to the public, how many can come in at any given day? If just say everybody decides.
Again,
to go to
don't
Kiwanis.
quote me. I think it's between 100 and 120, but I'd have to check.
So even if we were back under the old arrangement, you would still be able to accommodate 120 campers, just having half the facility?
I believe, yeah. But you're denying service to between 20 and 40 kids.
Per session.
Yeah, per session, which, listen, I live in New Canaan. I've been here 16 years, so I'm not trying to necessarily sound like I'm trying to muscle in and speaking just on behalf of the Y. It's been deemed an essential service. People use it to go to work. So there will be between 20 and 40 kids who don't have access to a camp. And given that, they're not locked down anymore, but those first 2 months were pretty rough. So there's a lot of parents and kids who are anxious to get out and about and have, a summer camp experience or something that resembles a camp experience. It's going to be far different than what we've offered in the past, but it will be something they will enjoy. But very difficult to manage, but we'll be able to do it.
So if I may speak, I feel that to increase the number or decrease it by 20 kids to go to camp, and therefore forbid the citizens of New Canaan from going to the camp, it doesn't balance. And I just don't see how you can prevent the citizens from going to just increase the number for another 20 kids per session. It's just off balance.
Your math sounded a little counterintuitive, Craig. I mean, if your offer was to fully utilize the facility with good social distancing, and we then tell you that you only have half of the amount of space to use, why doesn't that equate to half the campers?
Because I guess the half that we're using has much more land than your half. Your half has a small beach area, right?
That's not half.
Yeah, we got the small half.
Yeah, you got the small half. You gave us the side across the tracks half, so which we're happy to use, but I mean, it's
Well,
up to you,
I was gonna,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm gonna jump in and sit there and say, like Liz, 58 years ago, I was a Waikiki camper. And, you know, I think, that, a good lease with the Y makes a lot of sense for us as a town. The other part is, as Kevin has pointed out, this is, an exceptional year, a year of the COVID emergency. And I believe that the citizens of the town need to have another place to go. Because I always like swimming in the pond anyway. And so we seem to be spiraling in on we'll take the little half, and Craig and the Y can have the big half, and we'll let it work out and see how things go between, Craig and his staff and Steve and his staff. And I think there's a compromise there. Thank you.
I just think that the clientele of the park is our younger children who won't be going out at 5:30. They'll be having dinner and getting ready for bed. So I think whatever way it works, you have to let, especially during COVID, people really do need to get out. People are not taking trips. So what's the most number of people we can get to be able to use the park within reasonable hours? So, I almost feel like the way it was fine, would work. Going to where it's locked down and not open till after 5:30, I don't think that will work.
The greatest good for the greatest number.
One more question for Craig. Would you consider an arrangement that's limited only to New Canaan kids?
No.
All right, then we'll take the other half.
I mean, our mission is to serve anybody who wants to come to Y. I think, though, from previous discussions, that the amount of children that were on your waiting list, if we were able to go up to 140, we would be able to accommodate most of them.
All right, I hear a pause. So what I'm hearing is Kevin has tried to say he tried to give the greatest use to the greatest number of people, and that's why he wrote this lease. I hear a bunch of council members saying that the math isn't working for them, that to accommodate only 20 more campers, Y campers, is not a big enough good to shut it down for residents. However, tell me if I'm wrong, Kevin, but my understanding is if you were to open up a portion of the pond to residents, you would also have to take on new expenses of lifeguards and right, there would be additional expenses, right?
Well, that's in the budget, though. That was in the budget, $55,000 for limited hours compared to what we had historically. And also the fact that there is availability weekdays at the pool. So it's not as though parents don't have an option. We can accommodate that.
Of course, the other issue is the WISE offer builds in social distancing and enforces it without our having to worry about it. Do we really want that responsibility for the smaller portion of the pond? How do we know how many people are going to show up?
Well, Tom, that's if we count the number of kids this year, because I was there several times last year, we have more staff members on a day other than the campers who would come over. And the campers can't come over this summer.
So then that was the only reason I could think to justify
I mean,
Not
again,
prorated.
ideally, where I wanted to go with the plan to have a public-private partnership, have the Y operate the camp for the small number of families that actually use it. And the campers that would come over in a normal year from the Y camp, I'm sorry, the Waveney camp and the daycare center. But it's an extremely low number of usage in terms of residents that go over there compared to the pool is generally teeming, and the Y camp is teeming normally.
Kevin, you're going to have more demand for that park this coming year because of COVID. And you're only going to have limited capacity at the pool. Not all families can go there.
On weekends, you're gonna have limited. It shouldn't be a problem during the week.
Well, but weekends is a big day. I mean,
I know, but we can't control that. We have to cut it back to comply with the state requirements.
and that makes more for a demand on Kiwanis.
Kiwanis will be open on weekends.
This is awkward because we are in a crisis. We should be deferring to our chief executive to work out the details of these arrangements with all the factors, the issues factored in. And I wanted to defer, but it seems like there is actually a compromise that wouldn't be that difficult to structure. It'd be an easy fix to drafting the document. And maybe the Y would just get a prorated fee, pay a prorated fee for this rather than the 10,000.
It's already too low. What are you going to prorate it to?
That's a different issue. I would leave that to Kevin. It's a 1-year thing.
It's an 8-week thing. And it's also double what they've been paying, which itself is low. But they're also going to invest some money in the house.
I thought the Board of Finance was working on a new lease, obviously before COVID, where it was 15,000 for their half.
No, that was pre-COVID.
No, I said pre-COVID, but
with a full camp.
I thought that was for half.
No, we're not settling for half. We're doubling what they've been.
No, I thought the Board of Finance, has the Board of Finance seen this lease?
It doesn't require going to the Board of Finance.
Okay. But I thought the Board of Finance was working at $15,000 rather than the $4,950 they were paying pre-COVID for half of the park.
I think Ronna Siegel suggested $15,000 with a normal camp season.
I just want to echo. I want to echo Sven's comments. The greater good here. I think we've canvassed the issue. I think Kevin did the best job under the circumstances for negotiating. So I think we need to move on. And can we vote on this issue?
I agree.
I mean, this is analysis paralysis at this point.
Can I just get one clarification? Kevin, will the pond be open after 5:30 or not?
I think again, it's in the budget, and Steve can produce lifeguards. So he hadn't made a commitment yet, but if you want him to operate at night, he'll operate at night.
We think, let me just spell it out for you, Kevin. Rich wants to know, and now I want to know, that you, the CEO of the town, are going to recommend it to Steve Benko, who works for you.
I won't recommend it. If that's what you want.
That's what I want. I mean, we're telling the residents they can come at 5:30, and then we're saying it's not going to be open. I mean, that's just not. That's a big difference.
I think it's important to at least two of us that you recommend it.
So it's not a recommendation, it is an instruction from the administrative officer of the town to the department head.
Yeah, it'll be open at night.
Good. Okay, that makes a big difference, I think.
So we're going to go take a vote on the original proposal first.
So we had a motion and a second, and then we had the discussion. Kevin made his presentation in our discussion. So all in favor of the lease as it stands on your tablets, raise your hand, please. So John Engel, not Christina, she's a no. Rich is a yes. Mike is a yes. Mark is a yes. Sven is a no. Liz is a no. That's 3 no's. Tom is a no. That's 4 no's. Steve is a yes. Maria is a no. I think that's 5 no's. Penny is a no. That's 6 no's. So it's
I'm a no.
what?
John, sorry, I'm a no.
Does that make 7?
Yeah.
All the no's, you know, so I think we have 5 yeses. Raise your hand if you're a no. Robin, Penny, Maria, Tom, Christina, Sven, Liz. That's 7. That's 7 no's. So the lease is rejected. I guess we could bring it back.
So I would like to make a motion to have an amended lease. The amendment adding that the park be open in the evenings and the weekends with the conditions that have already been prescribed in the lease. We actually should have just voted on an amendment and then the whole amended proposal.
Okay, so you are suggesting that we vote for the lease plus extended hours, 5:30 plus the 5:30 and weekend hours.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Hey, John, before we strike that, or before we approve that language, I think that it should also say subject to demand, because the idea of having a lifeguard that we're paying sitting there with nobody there doesn't really thrill me. So I just want to make sure that somehow the word subject to demand is there, because if we don't have any demand and we're paying somebody, it's illogical. So, and from 5:30 on, the demand historically hasn't been there. Maybe it will be now because of COVID, but it doesn't make a lot of sense to have somebody sitting there with nobody around.
So then it's up to the rec department to properly advertise it and, around town that the park is open. If they want to justify their staff and efforts, promote it.
Penny, are you accepting Steve's language on your motion?
John, this has gotten confusing. You have to approve some kind of lease because the Y has to.
No, I understand. What Penny is saying is she's saying give the lease another shot with the caveat that you add extended hours. So, but Steve is saying, comma, subject to demand. Those adding hours, comma, subject to demand. Do I have a second? Steve Carl, got it. Any further discussion on the Penny-Steve proposal?
So here, what I would say is, what Penny's proposing doesn't require us to change the lease. We should just adopt the lease and trust that Kevin will implement Penny's suggestions.
Some of us thought we were voting for the lease with those provisions in mind, but now they're explicit. So
I'm still confused as to what you're saying. The proposed lease
right
allows residents to use the facility after 5:30. Is that what you're saying, Penny?
What we're saying, yes. And I think everybody was uncomfortable that if you just approve the lease as it's written without that amendment, and we should have amended the original vote. And I think that's why everybody voted it down. So if we have the lease as proposed with the amendment, that's what the vote is on the table.
Kevin,
that's an administrative issue. That's not something the Y needs in their lease. So that's just where I'm confused.
The confusion lies in the fact that somebody has pointed out that the language of the lease we are approving says 7:30, not 5:30. That's why Penny is being explicit. 5:30. Okay. So, no further discussion. All in favor of the amended lease that goes till 5:30 with a provision that the residents get use of it after 5:30 on weekdays and also on weekends. If you favor that, raise your hand. John.
That's what the proposed lease already says, John. That's why I'm confused.
Well, some people think that the proposed lease says 7:30.
No, it says 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m.
Again, this has nothing to do with the YMCA lease. This is a town issue after 5:30 that Kevin, as an administrator, can deal with.
And it says the YMCA acknowledges that New Canaan residents will have the right to use the lease premises outside of permitted hours. So after 5:30, the town has the park. What do people think they're voting on?
That's what I think I'm voting on. And you're going to make sure that we've got, if there's demand, you've got lifeguards.
Is there any further discussion? Are we going to change two minds with this added language? Okay, raise your hand. John. Rich, that's 2. Mark is 3. Mike, are you not? You're 4. Sven is still not convinced. Liz is not convinced.
He is.
Penny, what is that? 5.
5.
Carl is 6. And we still don't have, Sven, Tom, Robin, Christina, and who's my 5th no?
Maria.
Maria. So are we now 6 and 6?
I think so. Kevin gets to vote.
Actually, that's true.
I just want to be clear what we're voting on, folks.
The lease, but then you're committing to basically after hour and weekend time for the residents.
That's what the lease says.
I know, that's what you're being asked
And-
to do by 6 of us.
No, the lease says they're using it to 5:30,
Right.
but Penny's adding in that.
The campers actually leave at 4:45.
Right.
They
I
ever,
don't think we really changed anything with that vote.
We didn't.
I voted no.
But,
Doesn't
but
matter.
Kevin agreed that he would tell Steve to have it staffed if there were residents that wanted to use it.
Which does
Not
not
the
need
lease.
to be in the
That's
lease.
not the lease. It's not the lease.
well, it is in the sense that it expressly says in paragraph 5 that the town has the right to use it outside of the Y's hours. So that's, and I said earlier that, Steve is authorized and has it in the budget to have lifeguards there in the evening, as historically we've operated in the evening.
6 and 6.
Okay. I think part of the problem is we get these things really, look at this. This is 2 weeks before the camp opens.
1
We
week.
should be having these kinds of discussions a little bit sooner than 2 weeks before the camp opens. And so if there are problems with it, you have time to iron them out.
I second that.
I think everybody hasn't sat and been familiar with all of the details of the lease to the extent that you are, Kevin. And it makes it difficult for all the 12 of us to, be as, educated on all of the provisions.
So do you want me to vote?
So Kevin, you can either table it and we can come back to this if you want to go have conversations with the Y and the residents and see if you could forge a different kind of scenario. We'll call a special meeting and tackle this. You don't have to vote today if you think that you can forge a more creative solution. Or you can vote today.
I thought I had a solution already that was a compromise and accommodates as many families as possible with a product that's much different, being a full day camp. And
what can I say? Some residents said, that there's a far greater number of residents. And I heard from some of the council members that this year especially, you can throw out last year's numbers, that there's going to be demand for Kiwanis by residents. And there's an anxiety that the pool can't accommodate everybody. Whether it's true or not, there's an anxiety over that. So I don't know. You can vote, or we can table it and we can come back to this in a day.
I don't know how we would change it.
I hear you. I'm glad I'm not sitting in your seat.
Is there any latitude on the commingling, considering, I mean, that clause that says 2 activities can't take place on this big park grounds.
Well, again, the as big as Waveney Park is, we're having 30 kids in Waveney camps because of the restrictions. So, and that's a half-day program.
Kevin, do you want us to vote again on a 120, on a lease for 120 and basically reserving the other half for residents? Do you want us to vote for that? Or do you want to tie break the current vote? We have a couple of options.
Well, you voted, and technically, once you vote, I get to vote.
Yeah.
Right.
Vote.
So I recommended the lease. It's a compromise. We're going to accommodate as many families as want to be accommodated at the Waveney Pool. So I have to proceed with what my recommendation was.
Okay, Tom Stadler, record Kevin's vote as a yes. The motion passes. Congratulations.
Next.
Next on our agenda, the first selectman's report.
I'll make this brief. So,
Crack me up, Kevin. A little while ago, John asked how long that session was going to take. And you declined to predict.
well, I thought you were trying to do meetings to get over by 9 o'clock. So anyway, briefly, obviously, as I've reported publicly, the testing we're doing in town, as of yesterday's testing, we've gone over 2,000 people, and we had not had a positive case until last Thursday, but that individual, a college-age student, was retested both at Greenwich Hospital on Sunday and again yesterday, and turns out he's negative under both tests. So we still have 2,000 people, about 2/3 of which are New Canaan residents, without any positive PCR positive for the virus. But we also have very few, less than 75 antibodies, which means not many people that have been tested had the virus earlier since February. So that's all good news and bad news. We are reopening Town Hall next Tuesday by appointment, and on July 6th for the public to come, and we're making various modifications in the various town buildings to accommodate the requirements of workplace requirements for COVID. The library MOU, as I've told you before, we're trying to, it's very much a document in motion, partly because I think the town council made clear they want to understand what's going to be brought to P&Z, which will start at the end of the month. And also the realization that although we anticipated coming with an MOU that would be finalized and approved, we really are going to probably be working on the MOU all summer in subsequent meetings, since the COVID thing has made it slip. We selected a contractor to install the combined heat and power facility at the wastewater treatment plant, and we're proceeding with that transaction, which is funded by the major maintenance reserve of the sewer plant. We are out with a solar RFP for 5 or 6 buildings for the schools, West Saks High School, the wastewater treatment plant itself, and possibly having the Waveney Care Center and the YMCA participate if the bids are very attractive. And we had 13 contractors show up for the walkthrough on Monday, so that's good news. I'm working on a public safety tower, which we should have some news about soon. And I was very pleased to be working with Bankwell to make sure they stay in town with their headquarters at the former Unionum Covia building on 258 Elm Street. So that's about all I have. Any questions?
I've got a question, Kevin. There seems to be issues running around the state anyways as to whether there should be a lack of salary increases July 1st. And I think there's several municipalities that have approached their employees for freezing salaries during the COVID crisis. Could you just comment on that? I don't know what we've done or what other people have done. I'm just ignorant and curious.
Well, Stanford has a significant $35 million shortfall in their revenues. We don't expect a major, we've had shortfalls with parking since no one's commuting to Manhattan, and we have shortfalls a bit in building fees, but our revenues are not falling off terribly. We also don't expect many people to actually use the deferred tax deferral, which is only a grace period of an additional 60 days. So we, and also we're saving a lot of money. As Tom Butterworth mentioned, the Board of Ed is expecting to come in with $2 million under budget, and the town will come in under budget. For this year. And so I don't think we have a great deal of anxiety over our situation compared to cities like Stamford.
Thank you.
Could I ask about the coming in under budget funds? Is this an opportunity to capitalize on our contractors coming in with lower bids and take care of some projects that would be coming up in the coming years where the cost may be greater?
Maybe Tiger could address that. We haven't seen that yet, Tiger, I believe, but you'd think that that might be an opportunity, because I think a lot of towns and cities are going to be deferring projects.
Right, we haven't seen it yet. The numbers are very tight. The bids are tight. They're not markedly low yet, but what we're hearing on the street is that the majority of towns are going to be not moving forward with capital projects. So therefore, it's going to make it even more competitive, and then we should be able to see some numbers drop. There are, issues with COVID as far as working situations and things of that nature that tend to drive costs a little bit. But I think that as this extends a little bit, we'll definitely see our numbers come down.
But I mean, with the schools being empty right now, can we move forward some projects, and town hall is empty, or some of the other buildings are not as highly used? I mean, is this an opportunity for us to be doing those projects, or as opposed to just letting the money go back into the general fund?
Well, the funds that we have don't revert back immediately. The capital funds we have don't revert back immediately. If you're talking operating funds, we're going to, on the 13 days, they're gone. But we haven't really put a stop to many of our capital projects. They're moving forward. Some are taking a little bit longer than others, but they're issues not related to expenditure, more related to just logistics.
I realize those are operating funds, but
question is whether it would make sense financially to accelerate some projects that otherwise have not been budgeted.
Right.
Oh, okay. Different question.
But I wouldn't want to.
No, that was my question.
No, I didn't take it as that's Penny. I'm sorry.
But Tiger, just saying, let's talk about the schools. I wouldn't assume that it would be a non-event to start projects in the schools this summer, especially by the time we went through a rebudgeting process. That one of the reasons that they were happy to, or one of the benefits of them not having summer camps and things like that in the schools is that they anticipate having to make modifications to the buildings to prepare for reopening. So it's not a given that they'll be empty until school starts.
No, it's not. They have some quite substantial work to be done inside the school system. That is not my purview. I'm from the walls out. Walls in is the
How's the price of asphalt this year?
You would think that you might see something because oil went down so low, but no. The problem is that the majority of 92% of the material in asphalt is actually non-asphalt related. Sand, stone, things of that nature. It's only 8% asphalt. So when there's a change, it's not that great of a change. Our price this year was $98 to lay. Everyone was very close to that, and that was close to what our number was last year.
I was just asking because, I know that the liquid portion as a byproduct of refining. And if nobody's using any gasoline, maybe there's not as much liquid left.
You can go, yeah, right. It could go that way too. Less refining means that there's less stuff left. So then they're in the regard, even though oil prices are low, if there isn't anything left over for them, that price will accelerate. We actually did see prices of asphalt increase from last year to this year, even with oil prices dropping.
Tiger, I have a question. With what they're doing on Burtis Street, where they're lifting the existing asphalt and then reusing it, is there any savings in that process?
We're not reusing the existing asphalt. That was being milled out. The top part was a water main break at the intersection of Main and Burtis, and the top part of it was in really bad shape and had to be completely removed via an excavator and then regraded. The lower 2/3 were affected by water rush underneath the pavement all the way down to Cherry Street and came out, cracking the pavement transversely, intermittently along the way about every 50 to 100 feet, and washed out all the fines. So today we milled it out, took it away, and that gets reutilized in other products, either process aggregate based, or some does get reutilized back in asphalt, very small amount. And then we brought back fresh asphalt material from the plant.
Do we get anything back on having them take the material?
No, it's actually hard to get rid of that byproduct. Okay. It's not a savings. You're actually, most of the time the contractor's paying for somebody to take it.
Is that water damage being paid back by the water company?
Aquarian paid entirely for the first 100 feet and then is splitting the cost with us 50-50 for the lower 2/3, the last 2 feet.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Maybe this is consistent with Penny's question, but Vine Cottage, I understand that we're making use of it again. And I also heard people like Tucker say that it's going to be very important as all these New Yorkers come out to New Canaan and evaluate our town that it look as good as it can. So I wondered whether, consistent with Penny's question, whether that's something that Kevin, you and Tiger are thinking about maybe repainting the outside of the Vine Cottage. Is that something possible? It looks pretty bad right now. And if we're making use of it for the EOC, I wonder whether that's back on the table.
We're making use of it for the health department only through only through August. And the bidder is coming back to us with a plan. So
Are we opening it up to a rebid?
What does that mean, the bidder? A paint bidder?
No.
the party that offered to buy the property, we have to have an offer that I can bring to you.
Got it. Okay, understood. That's all I wanted. Okay, I didn't know who was using it for how long, so it's only 3 years. Got it. Any other further questions on the first selectman's report? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you, Kevin. I think next on our agenda is, got to pull it back up. My iPad went to sleep. Labor agreement. Do I have a motion? Mike Morrow, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I was on mute. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the Town of New Canaan's Department of Public Works and the union that represents the members. Union.
Second.
Who was the second? Steve?
Sven or Steve.
Okay.
Pick one.
Sven. Discussion. I guess the discussion will just say we've, Mike, I picked on Mike because he's had a conversation with Tiger and gotten into the contract in depth. And you feel good about the contract, Mike? That went a long way with me.
Yes, I think that Tiger and town have negotiated, I think, a good deal for the town that respects the employees' contributions to the town as well. I think the town has achieved significant savings in the contract, and I see no reason not to approve it.
And the rest of us got an opportunity to look at the contract earlier today. and had an opportunity to ask Tiger and Cheryl questions. And I think we've exhausted them and exhausted all our questions. And so if there's no further discussion, let's vote. All in favor, raise your hand. John, Christina, Rich, Mike, Mark, Sven, Liz, Tom, Steve, Maria, Penny, Robin. Okay, it's unanimous. The contract passes. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Tiger. Well done.
Thank you.
Only a year late, Tiger, but better late than never. I guess that the COVID got in the way. All right, we're on to proposed ordinance. We already passed the proposed ordinances alongside the public hearing. Financial update of recent financial results. Linda. There you are. Good.
Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen. Tom, if you can set me up.
You are the co-host. Go ahead.
I am. Okay, there we go. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. So just to walk through, and some of this was discussion that was had during the first Selectmen's update, is I've also attached your year-to-date financials as of May 31st. But what I also did, and this is a presentation I made to the Board of Finance, was I've been doing year-end projections just to kind of give us a sense of where we're going to end the year. And so I took year-to-date expenses as of June 8th. And as Tom, you've reported, and there's discussions I've had with the Board of Ed, the projections that I had here that I will update for the next meeting with the Board of Finance is projections from the Board of Ed. Initially, when we were having conversations with them at the beginning, we were looking at the Board of Ed coming in at about 750 under their budget. Their most recent projections is they'll come in at about $2 million under. But if you recall, at the last Board of Finance meeting, the Board of Finance did approve a carryover of $400,000 to a non-lapsing fund for COVID-related expenses, but with identified specific uses just to get the school buildings and facilities ready for the reopening after the summer. And therefore, of that $2 million that they anticipate saving, we're going to transfer 400 of that into their COVID fund, and therefore that would leave them with about 1.4. So this projections of them coming in under 750, this number, we're going to revise that to approximately 1.4. So we're going to add, and that does change our projected ending balance. So looking at all of our other department operations, we would be looking in total to a year-to-date projected expense of 140. This will be more than 149.1 because of that additional 700,000 savings from the Board of Ed, which would make us, if I go now to on the revenue side, right now we're projecting coming in revenues at 148.6 million. Initially, we were projecting that we would be drawing down on the fund balance by about 1.2. That was not counting, as I mentioned, the 700,000 from the Board of Ed. So that helps where we end with a fund balance. So rather than expenditures exceeding revenues by 1.2 million, revenues will exceed expenditures by about 500. Expenditures will exceed revenues by about $500,000. So now the fund balance drawdown will not be 1.2, but closer to $500,000, and which would leave our ending balance not at 29.2 million, but closer to 29.9 million, which is what we had originally remember when I came to you and we were talking about the tax deferral. we were initially assuming that we would end at about a $29.5 million fund balance, which is probably where we will end up ending after we close out the year. There are still some COVID expenses on the town, getting the town ready with partitions and office space, and so there's some additional COVID expenses that may incur, but right now we're projecting to come in slightly, we will come in under budget, but we will still draw down the fund balance by about $500,000. And the primary reason for that is you'll see that if you look at this sheet here on the revenue side, I've highlighted the revenues that we've historically over-collected on. Tax collections, we're still looking at collecting in excess of 99%. Part of the COVID, when COVID hit, we had already received the 2 annual tax collections. And so our tax collections in the current fiscal year were not impacted by COVID, and our back tax collections actually exceeded. We had a budget of $350,000, but year to date, we've already collected about $700,000 in back tax collections. And therefore, those 4 or 5 revenues are exceeding what we had budgeted, which is typical what we anticipated. We do have a couple of revenues that are not achieving those targets, so they're kind of offsetting the positive variances on those revenues I just mentioned. We had already been talking to you about the DOE excess cost grant. We budgeted $1 million. It's a formula based by the state depending on outplacement, and so we've received our full allocation, which is at $957,000, slightly under the $1 million that we'd anticipated. However, as I've mentioned in prior meetings, our building permits are coming in below what we had typically budgeted. We started seeing this downward trend last year where we brought in $880,000, and I believe last year our budget was $1 million. In the current fiscal year, we had revised down the budgeted projections to $900,000. Year to date, we're at $574,000. In talking to Brian, we're probably going to be at about $600,000, which is about $300,000 under budget. And then conveyance fees was one we had we've been monitoring, but I think we've begun to see an uptick, especially in April and May, because of what we were originally projecting in retail sales. It was kind of slow, but it has begun to pick up. And right now we're projecting to be at about $1 million, even though the revenue was budgeted at 1.2. But I think we may revise this again. I haven't looked at this data since last week, but I'll look at this again. But we may be getting closer to the 1.2 than we had initially anticipated. And as we've had discussions with parking permits, this is an area, and maybe Kevin can talk more about this, but with the commuter, with people not commuting to the city, we typically issue these building permit reminders in May, but I believe the Board of Selectmen this week voted to extend that to provide a grace period, and we will be billing those in November. The way that this revenue flows is we take in revenues during the month of May, June, and July. May and June, we typically bring in about $450,000 to $500,000, which is a big chunk of this $1.3 million. But because of that grace that we're providing, we don't anticipate receiving that revenue. So that's the driver of this revenue coming in at about $600,000, almost half of what we had budgeted. But all in all, total revenues will still exceed budget by about $680,000, largely because the over collection in the tax revenues, but that over collection is having to offset some of these under collections in these other revenues. But all in all, our revenues are still going to exceed our budgeted revenues. Our expenditures are still going to come in below what we budgeted to spend. However, the variance is not as high as we've had in prior years, and therefore this year we will anticipate drawing down the fund balance by a modest $500,000 or so. But I think it still positions us well going into the next fiscal year. And I think the Board of Finance, in looking at this data, was among the drivers for them deciding to not draw down fund balance for the next year by as much as they had initially anticipated, just to provide some cushion going into the next year. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have on this.
All right, now I can see your faces. Any questions? Okay, there being none, thank you. We can move on to the next item, which is, I guess, the 5-year capital plan. It's also Linda.
Okay, let me share my screen again. So again, you have the 5-year capital plan in your tablets. The plan has actually not changed since the last time we reviewed it. You do have in front of you, after this, approval of the bond resolutions and appropriations for the fiscal year that begins July 1, which are the bonded portion of the projects that are on this list. The tax-supported portion of these projects you did approve with the operating budget back in April, and therefore those are approved, but the bonded portion for the first year of the 5-year plan is what you will be addressing on the next agenda item. I believe this is on the agenda for you to review and acknowledge and have any discussions that you may wish to have on the 5-year plan.
Are there any questions on the 5-year plan acknowledgement? Rich?
Yeah, can I make a comment, John?
Yep.
One comment is I think that the 5-year plan hits an awful lot of the ratios and parameters that the Board of Finance set out. As you look through the 5 years, the debt levels are within the ratios. There's only one ratio on which it is outside, and that is on the percent of the expense spending of the general fund, which the limit's set at 10% of the general fund spending. For debt, it's 10.8 in this plan, and it grows to a little bit over 11 through time. So it's not dramatic, but it is outside of the range that was set last year. This plan does have a lot of the stuff in it that we've talked about needing to be done in the plan. It's got $10 million in for the police station. It's got $10 million in for the library. It has I don't know, somewhere between $7 and $8 million in for Waveney House. We won't be talking about Waveney House or the library tonight, so that's not an issue. As we get, I think the 5-year plan, I mean, all we need to do is acknowledge it. We don't really approve it or anything else, but I think it certainly is within the parameters that the Board of Finance has set. And I don't think it adds dramatically to the town's running. It should be noted that the debt service level, which is about $16 or $17 million, is roughly I don't know, 12 or 13% of the spend of the town. So when you look at relative to the expenditures that we've had of 148 million, and it's 16 million, so it is a relatively large expenditure. That's all I got to say.
Coming back to your comment, our targeted debt levels are to be, you said 10%?
Right.
And we're exceeding that? We're at 11%?
We're at 10.8.
Does that make you uncomfortable?
Well, I'm not kind of a debt hawk here, so I worry about the expense that we've got to carry the debt, but I don't think the debt level is out of control at $110 million, which is where it is. I mean, we have undepreciated capital on the balance sheet of about $420 million. That's what That's what we spent to get the town that we got today. And to have only $110 million of debt with a $420 million balance sheet.
Is it true, because I don't have it in front of me, but while we're at 10.8 and we have a target of 10, isn't that number coming down? It's not going up, right?
No, it's going up. It's going up from 10.8 to 11.2 by 2025 in this 5-year plan.
If we spend 10 for the library and if we spend 8 on what?
Right. And in that assumption, the general fund spending is appreciating by 2%. This is one of the charts that got sent around in assessing the plan.
Now, it is important to point out that, you know, the future years, each year, as you'll be doing in the agenda item that follows, we approve the actual spend of that year by way of appropriations and resolutions in a given year. So some of the future projects, although they're listed in those future years, you may not necessarily do all of those projects in that given year. And so those numbers will more than likely change as we approach those years. So the future years are more of a plan. So kind of take that with those ratios as you're looking at those.
I guess, John, one other comment about the plan is there's no capital in here for the Irwin House that I saw. So I have no idea what the Irwin House plan is.
Were you about to say something, Kevin?
Now, keep in mind, the plan is largely the facility numbers that talk about what maintenance is scheduled in future years. So it's not, and the department heads throw everything in the kitchen sink in there. So they're pretty gross numbers in terms of possibilities.
I'd just like to add that these are just budgeted numbers. They're not actual numbers. So these numbers may increase over time, especially when you're projecting out 5 years.
Actually, the facilities due numbers are actually inflated for the future years. So based upon estimated construction costs, right, Tiger? So that these numbers are, when they come out of facilities due, are not current dollars. They're
Quite frankly, I think it's pretty. I think it is. This is running capital expenditures on the order of $14, $15, $16 average per year. Over the 5 years, we've got depreciation running at somewhere north of $10 to $11 million on the town. So just maintaining it should be at least $10 or $11 million, I would think. So this doesn't have a whole lot of growth in actually adding capital or services to the town. I believe. We know it's got growth with respect to the library, which was $10 million. That's for sure. And now we're actually getting a $35 million building out of that. So that's $7 million capital that we would be putting in if we were.
Okay, any other discussion of the 5-year capital plan? And Kevin or Tom Stadler, do you require a vote, or is it enough that we put it on our agenda to signal acknowledgement?
Let Kevin speak first.
Do we typically vote to acknowledge it, or do we just really put it on our agenda? I believe we vote.
You typically vote to acknowledge it. And in some years, you actually approved it.
Yeah, the vote to acknowledge it, historically, we're acknowledging that it exists. We're not really approving anything in there. It's just, right. It's establishing the roadmap going forward.
Right. So if the discussion is around acknowledge or approve, you can speak now. Okay. So I make a motion that we acknowledge the 5-year capital plan, it being complete and reflecting the balance, and that we've looked at it, reviewed it, thought about it, and that as you point out, a lot of it comes from our own facility due numbers. So I make a motion to acknowledge the 5-year plan. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Rich Townsend, any further discussion on acknowledging the plan? Okay, there being none, raise your hand if you acknowledge the plan. You vote to approve acknowledging the plan. John Engel, Mark Jimsky is 2, Mike is 3, Rich is 4, Robin is 5, Steve is 6, Tom is 7, Penny is 8, Liz is 9, Sven is 10, and Maria is 11, and Christina
Missing in action.
has recused herself.
11-0.
All right, 11-0. Thank you. The
She's
the
back.
plan is acknowledged. Christina, would you like to vote to approve, to acknowledge or not acknowledge the 5-year plan?
I acknowledge it.
All right, now we're 12-0. Unanimous. Thank you, Christina. The plan is acknowledged. Next on our agenda, number 10, projects, appropriations, and bond authorizations. We have to approve of the following projects, appropriations, and bond authorizations, beginning with ambulance. Linda, do you want to take us through it?
I'll make a motion that the town council approve the resolution authorizing the appropriation of $210,000 for the ambulance 2020 project and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $210,000.
I'll second it.
Okay. Was there, I'm looking through my notes quick. I'm racing through some of the, do we have supporting documents that we could put on the screen that talk about these?
They're on the agenda, and there is a list that is part of the 5-year. There's a smaller list that talks about the bonding stuff, right, Linda? That's on your tablets. I would just, can I just comment as
Yes,
we get
there
into
is.
this before
If
we start running through them all?
Yes.
Do you want to see the summary or no?
Not until he talks.
Yeah,
Okay.
let's just talk about what we're trying to do. We're operating this exactly as a standard budget process, which says that at this time of the year, we're going to vote on approximately 5 or 6 or 7 appropriations that will appropriate basically all of the capital it's anticipated being bonding over the next 12 months. And so as soon as we approve this, we have approved the bottom line of each of the appropriations, and we recognize what it's going to be spent for. We do not any longer have the authority to disapprove anything on that list. So if there's anything you don't like in any of these appropriations, it's time to speak up. And as of July 1st, it's turned over to Kevin and the selectmen and Tiger and implemented as they see best. And so the list that we'll look at, which is about, what, 2 pages long, Linda, as we go through, ambulance is number 1, and then it's 5 buildings,
Yes.
et cetera. Okay. And we've reviewed this as we went through the budget process, so it's not like we haven't reviewed it. But it's time that if you got one you don't like, you ought to bring it up. And if you don't like the grouping, then it goes into, the grouping is what is being approved. So if the grouping adds up to $2 million, you're approving $2 million for whatever is in the first paragraph of the bonding authorization, right? And it can be traded off one to another. Correct me if I'm wrong, Linda.
You're correct.
Right? It won't come back here if we go to trade it off. So, you know, if there's some high price stuff that you don't, that we may not do or you don't want to do, you ought to get it on the list, because that will become free money if it's decided not to be done. And it won't come back.
All right, I think I found it. So ambulance is first on our list.
Rich, that's not technically true what you just said, because we always have to have a project that's been authorized. We can't substitute projects.
No, but you can substitute money between projects as long as it's within the appropriation, I believe. Is that true, Linda?
Yes, but the process for doing that does require going through the Board of Finance. Yes, it will be a transfer between.
Doesn't report coming here. Only between appropriations.
No, it does, Rich, just like with the Sac School roof, that the money for the South School that was saved, South School roof, which was $400,000, we had to come back to the funding bodies to approve the Sac School roof, to use that money that had been authorized, but we have to have a project that you've authorized. All projects have to be authorized by the town council.
And I'm just trying to, I've worked hard over 2 years to understand this. And so I apologize if I've got it wrong, but I believe if you can move money within an appropriation between any projects within that appropriation. If you want a new project, you can't move it to a new project.
Only if the wording on the bonding resolution is broad enough to cover it.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Correct.
Correct.
And the reason
that's why I said the first paragraph. The first paragraph defines what you can move it or not.
Right, which is what's on the screen. Which is what's on the screen now. I grouped the project by resolution. So if you look at the number 2, the school bond programs, money can be moved between these programs. So if any one of these projects comes in under, you could transfer money within that resolution to another project. Now it has to go before, it doesn't come before you, but it does go before the Board of Finance. But the total spend within the resolution cannot exceed the number, the total bonding amount. The reason you're seeing the Sac School roof project today is because when the South School roof was approved, it was just one project within that one resolution. So those funds could not be used for anything else without coming back to you, and that's why it's come back to you.
And so if you're looking at the schools here, we're approving $2,148,500 minus the 300, right, that is coming from another source. And so we're approving $2,448,500 effectively, right? And we think it will be spent this way, but if it's decided we're going to do half the LED lighting and it's going to cost $100,000, that can be moved between any of these projects at the Board of Finance.
But that's not really what happens.
No, what you've done is the only way that the monies get moved is if, let's say, the roof project, like in this instance for the Sac School, you had authorized, I believe it was a little over $2 million for the roof.
Yeah.
$2 million for the roof. The roof project came in under, and they had about 300 or so thousand left in that project, that funds that were bonded, and therefore those funds are being reappropriated to this other project. So for these projects, because you've authorized the project, so the projects will move forward, and the only way that the monies get moved is if any of these projects come under and one of these projects goes over, and so you have that flexibility to move the funds within the projects.
Okay, I think that's what I said.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But let's move on. I'm probably wasting everybody's time. My whole point is you're approving $2.5 million. If you want to argue with it, now's the time.
We learned this when we did the Waveney roof and windows, and they got moved around between roofs and windows. Famously, we learned this lesson, yes.
Or when you did the Saks expansion project and you got a new kitchen, so.
Right.
Yep.
We learn this lesson every 2 years.
And so as long as we're talking about it, personally, I'll just tell you my opinion. I think this is a great list. I think we've looked at it a long time. I think in standard budgeting, this is what we're doing. One of the reasons I asked Kevin how things are going earlier in the meeting was since we're operating this in a standard basis, we're not holding stuff back, is my understanding, to try and save cash at this point in time. And the Board of Finance has not said, let's see what we can do here and let's see how we can spread it out. Or let's see if we can defer it until we've got a better idea of what's happening with COVID, which is part of the conversations we were having 3 months ago. Should we be spending capital immediately? And at least what Todd decided and the Board of Finance decided was that's up to Kevin, and that's up to Kevin and Tiger, who are the experts in the area, on when we should do it. And so my only question as we go through there is that the situation we're in? Is we really don't have to worry about conserving cash. We ought to be operating business as usual. This is not wasteful, don't get me wrong, but when you're saying we're going to replace carpet in an entry hall of the school, that's not an emergency either. So that's my only point.
But these are all bonded dollars too, so.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And from a timing standpoint, if I understand properly, Kevin, we have got about $9.6 million that has been spent so far that will be bonded in the next bonding issue, along with whatever in this is ready to be bonded at that point in time. And Linda, correct me if I'm wrong, but so we spend money before we bond on the capital. We commit the capital, we spend the money from our bank, and then we bond when it's appropriate to bond. When we got enough debt to bond so that we're not getting wasting debt.
Correct. We've done that in some instances.
So I believe we have an ambulance on the been proposed by Sven. Who was the second? I think it was Steve. We've had discussion. We meandered a little bit away from an ambulance, but let's come back to the ambulance. Any discussion on the ambulance? Does anybody, now that we know that money is fungible within a single resolution, does anybody want to speak about the ambulance? Phil, do we need this ambulance?
We always need an ambulance. But for anyone that may not remember, we replace one ambulance every 9 years. So that every 3 years we're doing one ambulance. So this is a 9-year-old vehicle with a lot of miles on it, and by the way, it's been the lemon of the fleet. So we're looking forward to replacing this one.
Okay, all in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Okay, John, Mark, Rich makes 3, Robin is 4, Steve, Christina, Tom, that makes 7, Maria's 8, Penny's 9, Liz is 10, Sven. Okay, it's unanimous. The ambulance passes. Congratulations, Phil. Make sure you get one with pinstriping and racing stripes and
within regulations, of course. Yes.
Yeah, we need a really loud ambulance.
Bonnie will help design that.
That's right.
Phil, can you get an RV for that too? There's none out there.
That's right. Thanks.
Okay, Bonnie, tell them you brought home the bacon.
I shall. Thank you very much.
Okay, now audience of the meeting now that the ambulance is passed. Okay, schools, approval of the resolution entitled Resolution Authorizing an Appropriation of $2.448,500 Schools 2020 project and the financing of said appropriate issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $2,148,500. See Exhibit B. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Rich, second, Steve. Oh no, second, Tom. Okay, got to get Tom in there. Okay, any discussion on the schools? I'm going to put it on the screen just so you can see. It was complicated, lots going on in there. I didn't quite understand cafeteria roof, why it's in the separate column. I got the part where we already appropriated $2 million, and this $300,000 is part of that $2 million that we didn't spend. Why is it back in the project?
Because the cafeteria roof is a new project, and the $300,000 that are being used for this project are bonds that you had issued, which is the point I was making earlier, from the South School roof. That project came in under, and there's unspent funds. And therefore, rather than issuing new bonds for the cafeteria roof, we're going to reappropriate bonds that you've already issued that remained unspent towards the roof project. But there wasn't an authorization or a resolution for the Saks cafeteria roof, and that's why it's included on this list.
So it's 2.4 of projects and 2.1 of bond.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Any further discussion on this list? You better blurt it out because I can't see you all. Okay, if there's no further discussion, all in favor, raise your hand. John, Mark makes 2, Mike is 3, Rich is 4, Robin is 5, Steve is 6, Christina is 7, Tom is 8, Maria is 9, Penny is 10, Liz is 11, and Sven is 12. Passes unanimously. Parks. Who wants to do parks? Nobody else has it on their screen?
No, I'll do it. Approval of the resolution authorizing an appropriation of $505,500 for DPW Parks 2020 project and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $505,500.
Is anybody from Parks, could Tiger tell me what kind of vehicle and accessories are these? Just remind me.
The low boy.
These are the low boys? These are your vehicles, right?
Yeah, Parks is part of me, yeah.
And are they orange or are they yellow?
No, they're orange. We don't have any yellow trucks.
Okay, these are all orange.
Right. It says Parks on the side for that one. Highway says highway. Transfer and wastewater say what they are.
And what is Bristow Bird Sanctuary?
That's phase 1 for the Bristow master plan. That's
And
the majority of that is the walking path through the park itself.
And do you do that or do you contract that out?
Oh, we would contract that out. We would manage the project. The project's I just got the plan set today for it. It was being developed. It's ready. It's almost ready for bid. So we would manage the project with the Conservation Commission.
And the Conservation Commission met this week, and I was told they could give us updates if we needed them. We've seen this plan. We've seen the diagrams. It hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't. We had Keith Simpson Associates doing the plan. I think they walked you through it, and Chris Shipper walked you through it as well.
And the irrigation upgrades are for where?
That's throughout. We have 12 or 13 separate systems throughout all of our playing fields. That's throughout our entire network.
Those are sports fields.
Predominantly, yes. We have some around our buildings as well, town hall, other buildings.
Hey, John.
Go ahead.
Chris Shipper texted me earlier today, tell me that since the town is going forward with the Bristow project, he now has a verbal commitment from a donor for $100,000 toward the 5-year plan. So we expect to get a substantial amount of donations for this 5-year plan.
Perfect.
That's great.
Yeah, that's true.
Vehicle with accessories. What's that, Tiger?
That was the low boy.
A low boy. What's a low boy mean?
A smaller side of the truck. It's not our largest vehicle that the highway department utilizes, and it's in between a pickup and a large dump.
Okay. All in favor, raise your hand.
We don't have a motion.
We don't have a motion.
Oh.
I thought I made the motion.
Okay, Sven.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Sven read the motion.
Yeah.
Second.
And Liz seconds it. There. Now we have a second. Okay, all in favor? John is 1, Mark is 2, Mike is 3, Rich is 4, Robin is 5, Steve is 6, Christine is 7, Tom is 8, Marie is 9, Penny is 10, Liz is 11, Sven is 12. It passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Right. That was DPW Park C. D, Administration and Engineering. Sven?
To approve a resolution authorizing an appropriation of $3,288,065 for DPW Administration and Engineering 2020 project and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $2,600,000.
Okay, there's a bridge at Collins Pond. There are parking lots, $300,000. Sidewalks, $300,000. Pavement management program, $2 million. But also 438. Now, can you explain that? That's, I think it was 400. There's 2 million of bonded and 438 of operating. Was that it?
We received grants, 2 separate grants, a LoSiP grant and a TAR grant, a Town Aid Road grant. That makes up that $438,000. But you appropriate the entire project, so we can utilize the money, but the money's come in from the state for those two.
So it's 2.6 million of our bonding, 688 from the state for a total of 3.288 for the project. Okay.
Right. Yeah, the $250,000 is for engineering costs for the bridge at Collins Pond, which is being done by the state of Connecticut, or paid by the state of Connecticut.
Are there any other questions from the council?
Yeah, Tiger, can you just comment for a minute on the pavement program and where it is with respect to the the putting the gas lines down and everything else? How close are we to being done with all of this stuff?
Well, it's two separate questions, I guess.
It is.
Gas is a different entity than we have about a year or so left in our first go through our entire road network.
Okay.
So we have about one more year, maybe a little bit more, to get through every road that we started back in 2004. So we're 16 years in. It was a 20-year plan. We figured 16, 17 years in, we figured it's going to be 20 years. We're going to be at about the 18-year mark to get through everything. Eversource is still in, they're in phase 3 now, albeit a little delayed start due to the coronavirus. They're only allowed to do certain portions of work. New expansion work is not included per their guidelines. So they haven't been able to put in any additional mains in the ground except for the resiliency project, which is running along 123, which is important for use of gas in town because it gives us a secondary way to and balances their loads as far as getting gas into town, but it doesn't actually put any service lines to houses except for what's along 123. So we've been working, Kevin and I have been working with Eversource trying to show them new areas of expansion, specifically down Locust to Forest to hopefully down Cherry to cross 80, and then specifically down Upper Elm, Pine Street, and Grove Street to try to basically direct them in the areas of where businesses want expansion. And they're working through the engineering and their work on that side to actually start putting pipe in the ground. We've asked them when they're going to be starting. Hopefully they'll be starting soon for this season and then working forward through this phase and hopefully others. They are looking to put in a gas line down Ponus Ridge from Davenport Ridge to West School. That's part of our memorandum of understanding with part of the CHP units that we're installing throughout town. One at Saks and one at the wastewater plant specifically, so that helps offset the load or the cost. So there'll be no cost to putting that line into West School. And then they are committed to doing work in several of the condos where there's a large amount of main that has to go in the roads, just in the condo complexes themselves, and then extending a main down into our facility to the highway garage and the wastewater plant. One, to put gas on our heating systems there, but two, to put in a CHP unit that Kevin had spoken to earlier.
Okay, could you make a comment just on the sidewalks as well? The 300,000 for that. Are we getting some new sidewalks in addition to just fixing some of the old ones?
Those are all the majority or everything is the reconstruction. There's no expansion per se. Let's put it that way. There might be a fill-in, but there's not an expansion thereof. Everything's basically, if I have a sidewalk in, two locations and I don't have it in the middle of it, in a middle span on a roadway, that might fill that in. It's specifically geared towards residential requests and necessity, but there's no expansion. The only expansion that might occur is on South Avenue from Surrey Road to the entrance to Waveney, but that's because Eversource wants to put in a gas line down to the church. And we suggested going in the shoulder instead of inside the state road. And if they went in the shoulder, put a sidewalk on top of it, so we would get a free sidewalk out of it. So that's the only expansion.
Okay, thank you.
The rest of it is all reconstruction.
Vote?
We need a
Call the
second.
vote.
We need a second.
I'll second.
All right, Steve? John, you there?
Yep, all in favor? John is, Mark is 2, Mike is 3, Rich is 4, Robin is 5, Steve is 6, Christine is 7, Tom is 8, Maria is 9, Penny's 10, Liz 11, Spence 12. It passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. I was pausing on purpose to see if anybody had anything to say. Okay, so now we're on to town buildings. E, approval.
I'll do that.
What?
I'll do that.
Okay, go.
Approval of the resolution entitled, resolution authorizing appropriation of $1,375,620 for the DPW Town Buildings 2020 project and the financing of said appropriations by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of bonds in such an amount not to exceed $1,375,620.
Second.
Who is the second? Sven.
I'll second. I don't
Okay.
care.
Any discussion?
A question for Linda. Linda, part of this, I don't know, do you want to put up the chart of the detail behind this? One of the items, as I understand it, is $70,000 for Powerhouse Theater bathroom, ADA.
Boiler system.
Oh, the 70 is for their boiler.
Yes.
Okay.
We have monies appropriated for ADA compliance or an ADA bathroom there. We're still working through final plans. Going through
Gotcha.
various different iterations, but this is for both those, the Powerhouse and the Carriage Barn. This year's money are for HVAC systems.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can you comment on the cogeneration plant? This is a cost saving device, I believe, and I remember going in with the plan and eliminating about $400,000 out of the education budget. But where are we on this from a process standpoint? Is this really ready to be approved?
Yes, the Board of Ed and the town are partnering together. This is for Stacks Middle School, and also in conjunction with this is a boiler for the school itself that is in need of repair or replacement to the tune of around $100,000. We've already hired the engineer, OLA. He's given us a preliminary draft of where they believe they've given 3 options to proceed forward for the CHP unit, and it's up to the committee to choose which option to go forward with, and they're looking at within the next 2 to 4 weeks to come back with a plan set to then go out to bid. So the school is very interested in finishing this or moving this along. They need to replace that boiler by October before the next heating season and move forward. So yes, we're poised to continue.
But why wouldn't we defer this? Why wouldn't we defer this for a month until they actually decide what they're going to want to do? If I understand this properly, there's the cost of this is somewhere between, I don't know, $700,000 and $800,000 or something. And I don't know that there's been a whole lot of review of the statings, et cetera, and the assumptions in the business plan. I've got one sheet that you sent me, thank you, on what it is. And I don't think anybody on this call has had the opportunity to go through any of it. And it's close to $1 million.
Well, the problem is that one of the fastest is they might have to pull the boiler out of the allotment and then go forward with that. We don't want to delay any of the work on that front. Like I said, you're talking 2 weeks before they come back with a final plan set and a final review to go forward. So,
Rich, this has a payback of 5 or 6 years.
It's 7 or 8 on the sheet I saw today, Kevin, but I understand that. But that's all dependent on the assumptions that is in the payback, what the price of gas is, what the price of electricity is at that point in time going for the next 20 years, et cetera. And I just like to make sure that somebody's actually been through that and is happy with it. This got put in the plan and not all that long ago. And I know it's part of a very important program, but it seems to me that this is kind of a separate decision from the rest of this appropriation, and it's one that's not quite cooked yet. That's just my opinion.
we do have, the town hired our own consultant, MHR consultants, to be a secondary review process on it. He's been working with the engineering OLA quite readily. And the other portion of that is that this helps us offset the cost for West School. So if we pull this away, then we're going to lose the gas at West School since we don't have enough usage volume to actually then satisfy the MOU that we have with Eversource.
Okay, I'm just suggesting, I'm glad to do the work and spend time over the next 2 weeks to just take a look at it. But I'm just suggesting we pull out of this appropriation, do a separate appropriation and approve that, perhaps just with you know, some kind of consent or something across the town council, if schedule isn't the issue.
Yeah, this has been recommended by the advisory committee that Penny sits on, and the Board of Finance representatives. So this is something the folks who have looked at it very much think we should go forward with. So
I just like to look at it. I'm only one vote, Kevin, so if everybody wants to do it, great.
Which one is it?
The
It's half of this appropriation, John.
Right. Just wanted to make sure it was on the screen. Okay. Any further discussion? Does anybody want to vote? Did we already make our motion? We made our motion.
Yep, time to vote.
Okay.
Yeah, guys, just for the record, I would hesitate to hold up that West School gas line. I just, you know, it's just me, but I believe that's an important piece of this. So, you know, I respect Rich 100% going through this. I mean, Rich, you spent a lot of time preparing all this, but, you know, pulling this one component out, I just think we should stay on top of it as a council. And I'm happy to jump in, Rich, with you if you want. But, you know, as long as we stay on top of it, I'm comfortable approving it at this point.
Steve, I just think that once you approve it, you're done.
You and I have pretty loud voices.
That might be true.
If I may add, I think West School is going to be a tougher one to bring back into the picture once the gas company leaves. So if we don't do it now, we may not get a second chance.
Good point.
Let's vote.
Okay. All in favor, raise your hand. Sven is 1, Liz is 2, Penny is 3, Maria is 4, Tom is 5, Christine is 6, Steve is 7, Robin is 8, Mike is 9, oh, Mark is 10, and John makes 11. 11 yes, all opposed. Oh, we got 1, Rich. So it's 11-1. Motion passes. Okay, the next item would have been F, which would be Waveney House, correct?
Right.
But it's been tabled. That leaves us with DPW Highway 2020 program. Who wants to do the big trucks? Penny.
I'll make the motion.
You do it.
Oh, Sven, he beat you to it.
Go ahead. I've had enough fun.
I can't unmute Penny. She has to do it. Okay. There you go. You have to do it again. There you are. If we don't make Penny speak, she might fall asleep.
No. Resolution authorizing an appropriation of $313,000 for a DPW Highway 2020 project and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $313,000. I'm awake.
Second.
Low boy dump truck. Is that another low boy dump truck? And a wood chipper and a sander truck.
Second.
Big year for low boys. Okay, who was my second?
Tom.
Tom. Okay. Discussion.
Hey, just for the record, John, there may be a conflict from me because we may bid on some of these trucks. I just want to make everybody aware that we do supply some of these trucks. So for the record, we may be supplying some of these trucks.
So does that mean you won't vote?
Oh, I think I'm pretty clear on the fact that this isn't really a conflict for me. We need the truck, but we're happy to help provide them if we can.
Okay. Okay.
If you want me to abstain, I'm happy to, but usually I don't.
I don't want you to say. I didn't know whether that was a big buildup for a dramatic moment.
No, not at all. No. Just
All
for the
in
record.
favor, raise your hand. Liz is 1, Sven is 2, Penny's 3, Maria's 4, Robin's 5, Steve is 6, Christina's 7, Tom's 8, Rich is 9, Mike is 10, Mark is 11, John is 12. It passes unanimously. That's 2 low boys for you counting at home. 2 low boys.
Thank you.
Information technology is next. Liz, you want?
Yep, let me find it. Okay. Approval of the resolution entitled Resolution Authorizing an Appropriation of $135,000 for the Information 2020 project and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $135,000.
I'll second it, John.
Thank you, Steve. You know, I mean, I know what a low boy is. I don't really know what WAN software, hardware, IT, hardware, software means. It's probably little black boxes with blinking lights. But I guess I'm going to approve it.
WAN is wide area network.
I know it's a wide area network, but I mean, what does it do? we have a wide area network. Does it make it faster?
Yes, and it keeps getting, and the pipes need to get fatter every year because we all keep moving more bits, especially when we're all Zooming.
But we don't really know where this WAN is, right? We don't know if it's rec department or town hall or.
It's a good thing you don't know where it is.
Okay. All right, all in favor, raise your hand. John is 1, Mark is 2, Mike? Oh, there we go. 3, Rich is 4, Robin is 5, Steve is 6, Christina is 7, Tom is 8, Maria is 9, Penny's 10, Liz is 11, and Sven is 12.
John, when in doubt, just assume it's in the cloud.
And now the Lapham boiler. I don't know. Rich is interested in boilers and cogeneration.
I would be glad to do it, John.
Okay.
Lapham Boiler, approval of the resolution entitled Resolution Authorizing an Appropriation of $312,600 for the Lapham Boiler 2020 project and the financing of said appropriation by the issuance of general obligation bonds of the town and notes in anticipation of such bonds in an amount not to exceed $312,600. See Exhibit 1I.
All right. So because Rich wants me to make sure that in these projects, we're not sliding money around. In this resolution, there's only one boiler. So that is one big boiler for $312,600. Is this the one that we had to go get a
trailer?
Yeah. This was an emergency. Yeah, it was an emergency replacement. So the monies cover everything from the boiler that we had to rent to set up of that, and then engineering costs and construction costs to put a new one in. So it's all soup to nuts. So it's not one big boiler, 300,000. It's incremental costs that total 312,000.
Okay.
I'll second it, Tom, just so you know. Tom,
Okay.
I'll second it.
Steve has seconded it. Rich made it. Steve seconded it. All in favor, raise your hand. Sven is 1, Liz is 2, Penny's 3, Maria's 4, Tom's 5, Christina's 6, Steve's 7, Robin is 8. Okay, you're not Your hair? No. Okay. Okay. Rich.
Yeah.
9. Mike is 10. Mark is 11. John is 12. Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank you.
That leaves only committee reports. Bylaws and ordinance. Mark and Steve.
You heard enough from us tonight. It's getting late.
Conservation, Robin and Rich. I actually think that you should tell us what you heard from Steve or from Chipper and the others. What's going on with conservation?
Well, they're moving forward with the Bristow plan, and of course, they got the go-ahead tonight. Other than Bristow, which is the main focus, they're just working on water testing the Norotan River, and then town is working on testing the 5 Mile. So that's about it. Its main focus is Bristow.
Education, Tom and Maria.
Maria, you want to talk?
You're on mute.
You're muted.
I don't have the dollar amounts, but I know the Board of Ed has a lot more that they are going to return to the town. And they're keeping some in a revolving fund to pay for expenses next year.
More means more than 2 million? They already announced 2 million. Is this in addition to that?
No, that's it, that's
400,000.
it. That's it. Other than that, I don't really have anything else.
Wonderful parade, graduation. The huge elephant now in the room is going to be how they reopen. And
I want to know what the latest enrollment projections are. Do we know? Did that come up?
They said they were on track. There was no surprise. There were no surprises either way.
if you're looking for a bubble because of the real estate market, that hasn't been reflected in anything they've studied so far. But they specifically said they want to listen to realtors because you guys may know better at this point than they're able to predict.
Yeah. I mean, I could tell Lunda if he's listening that his building permits, I don't know if his building permits are going up, but his conveyance fees should be going up. Based on the total dollar volume of transactions are up in New Canaan and the number of transactions are up in New Canaan through the end of May, year over year. So
one thing that's an interesting thing, I know someone who registered their child for next year, they updated their information through the portal. And one of the questions was, do you own or rent? So and that's a new question. So it'll be interesting to hear what that data means or when they'll report it.
Yeah, I don't know who wants that data, if it's the schools or Lunda who's tracking that. But I mean, I could pull up a report and compare the number of closed rentals versus last year, but I don't know what that would tell us. If a house is occupied by an owner or a renter, it's occupied if it's occupied. I don't know if that matters to us. Somebody would have to dig in and see whether renting versus owning impacts the schools differently. I think it's a bigger project.
John, if you're off by more than 1%, you're going to hear from some email people.
Right.
You know who.
So I think it's, I said in the 4 o'clock call, the 2 private schools, and they said already they are seeing an increase in applications. And they're seeing an increase in applications both from people moving into town and from people who were formerly in the public schools. So I wonder if Katrina and the public schools are saying that their projections, their reality is in line with projections because they really are not seeing a surge, even though more people are moving into town. Maybe it's the private school is getting the largest share of that benefit. Don't know. Okay, thank you, Maria. Thanks, Tom. Next, finance and government, Mark and Rich. I think the biggest thing on our agenda is the library, $10 million. That's the biggest financial question before the next couple of months, is the library and Waveney. Kevin, do you have any comments on that? I mean, really, that's the biggest and most controversial questions, 10 million and 8 million.
You've got July and August to deal with it, John. So
You're feeling good that if we take action in August, that gives the public time to referendum if they want to? Barely. Okay.
They can referendum anytime. It's just that they won't coincide with the November election.
No, they can't. They have to referendum if they want it in time for the, well, yeah, they can
Right.
referendum.
You just have hold a special election, which costs the town.
Okay.
Actually, Penny, we can't hold a special election within the 45 days before November 3rd.
But you could do it after.
So, by state law.
Health and Human Services, Liz and Penny. Anything? I heard from a resident today who was interested in, very interested in the tax abatement program. She's a 90-year-old woman on a limited income in New Canaan. And I heard about this and I thought, oh, this is still a great deal of interest. You had a surge in applications or a consistent number of applications on tax abatement for the elderly this year? Do we have any insight on how those numbers are doing?
I have no input on that. I can, check the SEBI, but I haven't heard.
Kevin, do we have any plans? I mean, it's not specifically Health and Human Services, but do we have any plans to remind the public that they have 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks to apply for a tax deferral if they need it and can claim hardship? So you have to say, I have a COVID-related hardship and I want to defer my property taxes. Are we intending to remind anybody?
Well, it's been on our website continually since you approved it. So on the news item, we haven't taken it down.
Can you mention it in your 7 o'clock call one day? Because I wonder if some of the senior citizens who are perhaps most needy of this.
Actually, John, I think the senior citizens are the least likely to be able to qualify because they're on pensions and Social Security, so that they don't have the 20% reduction in income that you need to qualify.
Okay. I still think we ought to rely on something other than the town website to get the word out. So I don't know how
The tax collector,
What?
the tax collector is including, Roe is including a blurb on the bills that go out. So that'll be another place where that's going to be mentioned as well.
Okay. Infrastructure, Christina and Penny.
Christina called the meeting. You want to make the report?
Sure. I have, we discussed recently at the meeting that we had this week, the library's MOU and the fact that we haven't received it, but we discussed more or less some of the concerns the committee had, and the preservation of the 1913 building was discussed. And furthermore, we discussed the Waveney House renovation, and the latest asked for 1.8 million. And we agreed that the town should retain a third-party consultant to look further into the direction of Waveney House and determine its highest and best use. I think
You
that's.
go so far as to suggest how much we might spend on a consultant and
No,
no?
no, I didn't.
And did you go so far as to pick a timetable during which we would either hire one and they might do their work?
That would be up to the first selectman or the board of selectmen.
Oh, well, you just want to recommend that they choose one on their timetable. Got it.
Prior to the 1.8 million being spent, we agreed with the Board of Finance that spending the money without knowing the use of the building is not in our best interest.
Your committee, do you want to take that in front of the whole town council and discuss it in a special meeting or next month's regular meeting?
Sure, we can do that.
Okay, let's put it on the agenda and put up some slides and talk about highest and best use and a consultant. Okay, remind me to put it on our agenda.
Okay.
Since I'm on the subject of infrastructure, I did get an email from a citizen about a cell tower on, and it was meeting and zoning standards. I don't know, Kevin, you can choose to be silent on it, or if you know any information on this, is the cell tower moving forward with Homeland Tower meeting all planning and zoning, or is it exempt from meeting planning and zoning standards?
Well, you're talking about the Ritchie Cell Tower on Soundview Lane?
Yeah, I got an email from a citizen who was concerned. We all did.
So there's a Connecticut Siting Council hearing on July 9th by Zoom. And I will speak, and John Goodwin will speak on behalf of Planning and Zoning, and the public can speak. So there's an opportunity for everybody to express their point of view. As a lawyer, I know that the Connecticut Siting Council is has exclusive jurisdiction on cell towers, and so the Planning and Zoning Commission already submitted a letter on January 2nd. But you know, the most you can expect is they're going to give due consideration to your recommendation, because they're not governed by your planning and zoning regulations.
But Kevin, do you support the planning and zoning regulations?
I don't. First of all, Christina, I don't know the details. I mean, I recall a discussion there's about moving the location and also having a structure as opposed to not having a structure. But I'm really going to speak more to the need for cell service. You know, the particulars of that project have been on. You know, it's subject to negotiation between the property owner and Homeland Towers. So I wasn't involved in those negotiations.
The letter said specifically that there are certain requirements like floating balloons, and we were not, and Homeland Towers was not following the state requirements.
I read that today, John, for the first time. I'm trying to get to understand why that is the case. I don't know why they would not have a balloon float.
They did it already.
Yeah, it was confusing to me that, and I just didn't know whether the allegations were true. So we don't have to get into that here, but I think it was important for the town council to take an interest whether we are in fact following our own regulations. But I'm glad you're telling us that we have a July hearing and that you'll be there and John Goodwin will be there to set the record straight.
And any member of the public or any who wishes to speak. That's why they have a public hearing. Normally it would be in New Canaan in our town meeting room. But it would be by Zoom. So.
Okay.
Will it be posted on the town calendar?
Yes.
Okay.
Kevin, I don't know what your procedure is for answering every single letter or email that comes. The letter mentioned that there had been multiple letters to you about this and your position on it. So I don't know whether or not it's appropriate for you to, follow up with just a, enlightening email that the public hearing is going to be on the date.
Tell them what you told us.
They know that the public hearing is coming up. That's why they're writing emails. And they wrote to me and Kit and Nick and asked us to endorse the planning and zoning regulations. I don't think it's my role, although they're saying now that if the CEO does it, has more meaning than anybody else in town. I'm looking into that because, quite honestly, again, I've been dealing with this issue for like 7 years, and I know the Siting Council, as a matter of law, has exclusive jurisdiction. They give whether we have regulations or we simply write a letter and say this is what the town prefers. It amounts to the same thing. They will give us due consideration.
Okay, good.
As they did with the Armory site, where the Merritt Parkway Conservancy now require them to do a slick stick rather than doing the Siting Council does listen to people's comments. People ought to come out and give their comments.
Good.
Land use and recreation, Robin and Maria. I think it's one of the most important things in our town, land use and recreation in particular. I mean, it was why people showed up at the beginning of our meeting today. Recreation is really important. How's it going?
Good. The paddle courts were open this morning. They were filled, but just what Parks and Rec went over is that the Waveney Park Conservancy is creating a map of Waveney with a grant from New Canaan Community Foundation. They discussed that. The Mead Park courts are opening late, but that's because the contractor we're using, he had to lay off a lot of people and some of them haven't returned and he had to retrain new people. So those are open now. The pool capacity will be 258 people. Some of the rules, concrete decks around the pool have to be cleared. No sitting on the concrete, 320 people in the complex, 40 people in the kiddie pool. They're going to ask for people to wear masks outside of the pool, 6-foot social distancing in and out of the water. The restrooms will only be used for bathrooms. There's no changing. You come in your suit, you leave in your suit. The June and July concerts, unfortunately, have been canceled. Steve Banko's looking into drive-in movies at Waveney. As of their last meeting, 229 family passes were sold for the pool. And that's about it. And of course, as we know, no non-resident passes being sold for the pool to limit numbers.
And the 4th of July has been canceled also?
Yeah, that was the 4th of July committee that was canceled.
Thank you.
Public safety, Liz and Mike.
I would just say I attended the fire commission meeting earlier. They're expecting to be on budget. They're waiting for the rescue truck. They're not sure if that's been impacted by COVID or not. And that's all I've got. I don't know, Mike, if you have anything else. That's it.
Okay, I think we're all set. If there's nothing further, do I have a motion to adjourn?
Hey, John, I hope this is the last time we have to meet like this at a regular meeting. May this be the last time, please.
Is that really a possibility, Kevin? Is anybody really talking about opening?
Yeah. Now that they've increased the numbers of gatherings and stuff, some, will probably return in July to physical meetings.
Are we really going to sit next to one another?
Yeah, have social distancing.
6 feet apart.
Gonna wear your mask, Penny. I'm gonna.
Well, but a lot of people too anticipate that you can do a mixture. People that don't want to come in person can be on by Zoom. So
I think that's great. I think it's going to be great. I think, we have some important conversations that take place over the library and Waveney at the very least, and the continued reopening of town and how it's going. We've had marches in the last month down South Avenue. I mean, we've got a lot going on. It'll be nice to meet again. Okay, do I have a motion to adjourn?
So
Steve made a motion. Christina's seconding it. Raise your hand. Okay, I guess we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. See you in July.
Thank you.
not at all.